Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Dynamics 365 Tech Talk. What's new in supply chain management, Wave 2 2022 edition. My name is Michaela, and I'll be your moderator today. We are broadcasting this session through Teams live events, and the audio can be heard through your device speakers. This session is being recorded on behalf of the Microsoft Corporation. When you join this event, your name, email address, and/or phone number may be viewable by other session participants in the attendee list. By joining, you are agreeing to this experience. The recording will be available on the Tech Talks Community Dynamics page within the coming weeks. If you have questions for our presenters or need support, please use the Q&A panel located on the right side of your screen. Our presenters will be responding to your questions during and at the end of the presentation. Thank you for your patience during these announcements. Kicking us off today from Microsoft, we have Nicole Gump, Senior Solution Architect. Nicole, over to you.
Thanks, Michaela, and welcome everyone to our latest installment in our What's New in Supply Chain Management series. Let's get started with our customary joke. So I have a supply chain joke, but you might not get it for a while. Punchline at the end, so stay tuned. Let's go over our agenda for today. We have an overview of the new features that are coming in Wave 2 2022. So that covers this month, October 2022 through March of 2023. We'll do a deeper dive into a selection of features as well as do a couple of live demos for you. And then we will have time for Q&A at the end. So let's get started with the overview. So as we did in the last wave cycle, we've broken the overview into our core application as well as our add-in services. So let's start with the core application areas. So starting with warehouse management, some of the new features in this wave include being able to look up data in the warehouse mobile app. This is our data inquiry flow feature that we actually covered in a separate Tech Talk a couple of months ago. We have a multi-level detours. That's a feature enhancement to the detour features for the warehouse mobile app. Another one that is a feature enhancement is the auto submit detour steps. We now have the ability to pack containers and shipments within the warehouse mobile app. And we have our guided warehouse implementation experience. This is actually a set of features, and it's actually what I'm going to demo today. And then we have optimizing the warehouse setup with the application insights. On the transportation management side, which includes landed cost module as well, we have a feature for assigning shipments to related route segments. This is our milk run scenario. And then for landed costs, we have a performance improvement for generating data manually on the voyage editor page. So that just makes that page much more performant. Continuing with our core application areas, in manufacturing, we have on-hand information available on the production orders to release page. We have the feature to make goods physically available before posting. This is the feature that Anne is going to demo later on. We have monitoring equipment with the new sensor data intelligence. This is kind of the evolution of our older IoT feature. We have enabling the use of the number pad for signing in to the PFE or the production floor execution interface. And then in the planning area, we have for planning optimization, support for several features, including the batch disposition code, process manufacturing, finite material scheduling, sales quotes, and supply forecasts. Also in planning optimization, the ability to group transactions. In DDMRP, the ability to view and apply detailed insights. Then we have our make to order supply automation. Continuing with our core application areas for procurement and sourcing, we have assess supply risk to prevent supply chain disruptions. Anne is going to cover this one as well. That's a set of new embedded Power BI reports. Then we have source documents and materials from multiple vendors. This is a feature we have heard requested often, so we're excited to have this feature land in this wave. We also have the ability to put vendors on hold for purchasing. And then on the sales and marketing side, calculating the line net amounts on import of that source document. And then calculating sales totals on multiple threads. That's another performance improvement. And then updating prices and discounts that are entered manually for intercompany orders. On the PIM side, or product information management, we have the ability now to display product information in the user's selected language. That's it for our core application. So if we move to our add-in services for inventory visibility, we have a few features. The first one is allocate and reserve WMS-enabled items. So kind of the first iteration of the inventory visibility service did not support WMS enabled items, so we now do. We can also track soft reserved quantities within allocations, as well as preload streamline on-hand inventory lists. So again, this is more of a performance improvement. So that's a high-level overview. I know that was quick and that was a lot of features. We do have a set of features that we're going to do a little bit of a deeper dive into. So for feature reviews, I believe we have 10 total. So here's what Anne and I are going to cover. I'm going to start with a set of inventory and logistics features. So that assign shipments to related route segments. That's our milk run scenario. I'm going to cover that. Then I'm going to switch to the warehouse management side, cover our WMA, all of our app features. So look up relevant data, multi-level detours, auto submit detour steps, pack shipments. And then, as I mentioned, I'm going to do a demo of the guided warehouse implementation experience features. I'm going to then hand it over to Anne for manufacturing and planning. So she's going to cover sensor data intelligence, the make goods, finished goods physically available before posting feature, which she will demo, and then for planning the multi-source products, as well as that new embedded Power BI dashboard experience for assessing supply risks to prevent supply chain disruption. So this is really our supply chain resiliency feature enhancements. Okay, so a lot to cover, so let's dive into it. So starting with the assigned shipments to the related route segments, that is the feature name in feature management. It is still a preview feature as of 10.0.31, which was just released this week. And that is the last release that's technically in this Wave 2 2022 cycle. So some of the benefits for this feature are, as I mentioned, being able to support that milk run scenario. So this is the scenario where you would be loading a truck, right, or a container for multiple stops along a route. So you might have shipments to multiple different customers, and maybe they're all in the same, metropolitan area, same postal code for delivery. So you're taking one truck and you're making multiple stops to multiple customers along the route, and then you're coming back to, the distribution center. So we consider that a milk run in our transportation scenarios. So what this new feature is allowing us to do is, as we do that kind of multi-segment route, which we support today in TMS, we can now also appropriately apportion the freight costs for that route across all the segments or individual shipments that they represent, right? So each customer is getting the appropriate freight cost that was not possible before. If you had a multi-segment route and you were trying to do the freight reconciliation, it was all landing against the first segment. So this is the gap that this feature fills. Okay. So what it is dependent on, obviously, is that you're using transportation management and more specifically that routing functionality, as well as the freight reconciliation features in TMS. There is documentation that you can reference. You'll be able to click on these links when the recording is posted. So switching to the warehouse management side, like I said, there's a few features I'm going to cover here that are all related to our warehouse management mobile app. And I'll make a side note because I have seen some communication about it just this morning. There was an app update released this week. If you are running that on an Android device, the version that was released earlier this week was crashing in certain scenarios. A fix was released for that just this morning. So if you're running into that issue, please go take the latest update for the warehouse mobile app that was just released this morning. So from a feature perspective, we do have several new features. The warehouse management app data inquiry flow is one we have actually covered previously, but this is the one that allows us to look up data from within the app. So instead of having to go back to a back office system and look up information in the UI, we can do it directly from the mobile app. So we can search and select records from a list like we show here on the right-hand side in the screenshot, where we're looking up purchase orders that are arriving today. And then it's showing me the card view of the purchase orders that meet that criteria. And then I can select them. This feature is dependent on having your warehouse app step instructions enabled, as well as the warehouse management app detours. These are both features we've covered in past Tech Talks as well. There is pretty extensive documentation on this for setting up the feature and walking through some scenarios. As well as I mentioned a couple of months ago, we actually did a Tech Talk that deep dive just on this when it came out in preview. So if you missed that Tech Talk, definitely go back and look at it if you're interested in using this feature. For our app detours specifically, we have a couple of enhancements that are landing in this wave. The first one is the multi-level detours. So feature name and feature management is multi-level detours for the warehouse management mobile app. The benefits are that we can now initiate a detour if we're already in a detour from our initial workflow. And we support that 2 levels of detour kind of out of the box, but it is extensible if for some reason you require 3, 4, n level number of detours to be able to be initiated. So this one is dependent, obviously, on our app detours standard feature. And there is some documentation that you can reference. We covered the standard app detours feature pretty extensively in last year's Wave 2 What's New in SCM Tech Talk. So check that out if you have not enabled the app detours feature yet and want to see that demoed. Another one that is an enhancement to that app detours feature is the auto submit detour steps. So this one, the feature name is Auto Submit Detour Steps for Warehouse Management Mobile App. And our benefits are that we can now take information that is populated into the detour flow from the original flow and kind of auto submit that form and have the system process it without the user having to click the enter or confirm button, the green check mark on the app. So it's more efficient when we move into that detour flow because we aren't asking the user to do that extra click to initiate it. So this again is dependent on using that app detour feature. And we do have some documentation on it. And again, we did cover the base app detour functionality in a previous Tech Talk. So the screenshot I have on the right is showing you the new parameter that's available once you enable this feature. So we're in our mobile app step instructions. That's the framework that has our promoted fields, our app detours that we use for our data inquiry flow as well. But when we're in that setup, when you configure a detour and you select the fields that you're sending to and bringing from the detour, you now have this parameter to say, I want to auto submit this information. So the example that I'm showing is my step instruction that I'm on is for sales picking. If it's asking me to scan a license plate ID, I have a detour configured to do a location inquiry. So the user might be doing the sales pick. It sends them to the pick location. It says scan a license plate, but maybe the license plate is damaged. Maybe it's completely missing from the carton or the pallet that they're supposed to be scanning it from. So they want to do a location inquiry to basically query the system for what license plates are on hand to be able to pick from. So previously, when we did that detour to the location inquiry, we could pass in the location. So it would put the pick location into that detour, but the user would have to confirm it, right? Even though we've passed in the information. So now I can say auto submit. So when I initiate the detour, it's going to auto submit the location and it's just going to show me the results, right? So instead of me having that extra click, it's just going to say, here's the list of the available license plates in that location. I can pick one, send it back to my original picking flow and just move on. So it's more efficient. Okay. I think this is our last one that involves the warehouse management mobile app, and it's the ability to pack shipments from within the app. It's called in feature management, pack containers using the warehouse management mobile app. So what this does is move our packing experience to a mobile one. So instead of being tied to the UI and having to work, at a packing workstation where I've got a desktop computer, and I can now work with my warehouse mobile app and work in a larger packing area, right? So if I've got maybe full pallets of product that I'm wrapping and weighing and packing, I'm probably out on a floor location, right? I'm not tied to a packing workstation. So I now have this ability to pack those larger items without being restricted to a smaller workspace. This feature is dependent on that framework that I just described, right? The mobile app step instructions, your detours, your data inquiry flow. The reason it's dependent on these is because when this feature is enabled, you're going to get a few new mobile device menu item options that you can set up for creating the container, packing inventory into the container, and then closing the container. All of those require steps for, looking up the container type to create the container, or looking up the shipment to pack the items into, or, looking up the container ID that you've created to close it and weigh it. So those things become much more efficient if you're not asking the user to manually enter all of those pieces of information, because most likely they're not going to have something to even scan. The best way to do it is going to be to make use of our data inquiry and in our detours to be able to look up the information, just select it, and then move through that packing workflow that you would typically do in that pack form that's in the UI. But now it is a collection of these different mobile device menu options. We do have documentation that can be referenced. For now, this is just the kind of information that I've just given you about the feature, but our existing packing documents will be updated to include this mobile packing experience. So be on the lookout for that. This did just land as well in the 10.0.31 release. Okay, and finally, our guided warehouse implementation experience. So this is not actually in feature management. You won't see this name. But it's a collection of features that's part of our larger work on what we're considering ease of implementation for the warehouse management solution. So it includes some wizard-driven setup experiences. That's what I'm showing in the screenshot on the right. some simplified query views that's specific to our location directives, visualizations, simulations testing, a lot of that's around the location directives as well. And then a new workspace in the warehouse management module for the warehouse implementation tasks that need to be done. So there is a reference document out there, but I'm going to go ahead and demo a lot of these things for you. So let me switch to my system so that I can demo what is now part of this collection of features. So let's start with, I mentioned several things around the location directives, so let's go there. So under setup and location directives, you're going to see the first thing that's popping up here on the right. I'm going to collapse it. This is probably what your location directives form would normally look like. But now if we pop out this related information pane, our fact boxes on the side now show this kind of simplified query view, meaning I don't have to go into every edit query, at the top, down here for each of my sequences to see what the queries are. It's going to show me that in this information on the right-hand side. So I can see the header query, I can see what's in the action query. I can also see if there's any sorting in that query, as well as the last thing down here we're going to cover in just a few moments, but it's the acceptance test. So that's another exciting new feature, but you can kind of see that from this view as well. So simplified query views. We also have the ability to copy location directives across warehouses now. You always had the ability to copy a location directive from this form, but you in the past were not able to change the warehouse it applied to. So we are giving you that option now. This list is obviously filtered for just WMS enabled warehouses, but you can select another one and copy it across to another warehouse. So if you aren't using like our data entities to load these location directives, maybe you've only got a handful and you want to just create them in the UI, but you've got a few warehouses that the same setup applies to, you can now use this to copy across warehouses. Okay, and then we also have, let me go back to my system there. We also have the ability within the query editor. So if I can see a preview here, but say I do want to jump into one of these queries, I now have a button in here called preview. So I can see that I've asked for, warehouse 24, physical inventory is greater than 0, and I've got a couple of location profiles that are specified here. If I preview the results of this query, I can see that these are the locations that meet that criteria where I've got inventory on hand. So these would be the ones, as the location directive is evaluated, that would apply. So that's giving me kind of the ability to see, is the location directive query, set up correctly? Am I going to get results returned here? So that's the preview. Let me go out of here. Back to this form, a couple more things I want to point out. We're in a pick directive right now, and there is a new feature that does have to be enabled in feature management called location directive scopes. I have enabled that in my environment. As always, I'm just in the Contoso data set. I'm in the USMF legal entity as a reminder. And I'm in the location directives picking from Warehouse 24. And we now have, with that feature enabled for location directive scopes, this dropdown that replaces the kind of single SKU, multi-SKU functionality that was on the location directive header. So this eliminates that need to set up multiple location directive records right over here for single and multi-SKU scenarios. So now we've got this scope for the pick that applies to a single item or multiple items. There is a good description on it if you hover over as well. If we switch to a put, you'll see there are a couple of additional options, not only single and multiple, but there's the single item or order. So that the order option there would be multiple items on the same order. So something like a raw material picking for a production order. Or we have the all option that applies to essentially every combination of items and orders. And it's kind of the catch-all. There will be more information. There's a matrix kind of where these options apply to when the location directive scopes feature documentation is published. Again, this is new. So if you've got this preview version of 10.0.31 and you want to start looking at all of this guided warehouse implementation experience feature set, make sure you've taken that preview version this week. Okay, the last thing we're going to talk about in the location directives form is the testing, right? So I alluded to that. You can see it down here. Let me switch back to my pick because we do have a test set up for that. You can see I have this test set up for eaches from bulk. Let's talk about why we might test that. So my location directive that's set up right now says, the first sequence is restricted by the pallet unit. So I'm going to pick pallets, if I scroll down here, from my bulk locations. But if I look at the second sequence, it's not restricted by any unit. So any other unit other than pallet, could be eaches, cases, whatever. I'm then going to pick from the floor first if I have available inventory. And if there's nothing on the floor, then I'm going to pick from bulk. But I have this test set up to pick eaches from bulk. So I want to test, whether or not the location directive is going to work if it falls through, like if I don't have any inventory in the floor and it falls through to this sequence to pick from bulk, is that going to work? Okay, so I can go into acceptance tests here at the top of the form, and I've created that test that says eaches from bulk. I'm going to scroll past this. I'll come back to it, that section. But what you'll see is you've got this when kind of clause. So this is me simulating a pick that would use this location directive. So I'm in a sales order pick. I've got a particular item that is just in eaches being picked from this warehouse. And I'm saying, what's the then, right? What's the edit query, right? Kind of in that location directive action. I can pick an exact location to test. I can pick a location profile, which I've done because that's how my query is set up. Or I can actually write a .NET expression in here if I want to. You can see at the bottom, these are kind of the log of the results of running these different tests. And you also get a log that tells you why it passed or failed. Let me scroll back up and explain kind of the relevance of this. So this is our given statement. We can do one of two things, right? We can kind of run this test with our current on-hand inventory levels. So this really would be what it's evaluating if the location directive is run as part of the work creation process, right? With our wave execution. Or I can simulate, I can say no inventory. So don't consider on-hand inventory, but do consider if I had this amount of inventory for this item in this location. So that's just me kind of simulating an inventory scenario and testing whether or not this works. So once I have all of my kind of variables, criteria set up here, I can run this from this form. It's going to tell me down here whether it passed or failed. I haven't warmed up my system this morning, so this might take longer than usual. You can see it did take quite a while to run, but it did pass, and it's telling me why it passed. And if I go back, if I close this, you can see that I can also run these from the fact box on the right. But one of the interesting things we have as well is the ability to, if I click on the ellipses here, I've got, I can go see my acceptance test from here, but I can also initiate a run of the test after I've made a change. So if I want to say, hey, if I switch this one to be a batch enabled one, and I save that and I rerun this test, right? I want to see if that's still going to work after the change. And it may or may not. I think it still says that it passed, so all good. The other thing that I want to point out here is the coverage button. And I think this is actually one of the neatest features in here because it helps you visualize how the system is evaluating the location directives. So this form can be difficult to navigate, right? Especially if we're trying to troubleshoot, where exactly is our setup going wrong, or where is the system running into an issue. So now this tells us exactly, right, based on this test, what is being evaluated. The yellow lines, the system considered, right? It evaluated the criteria, but it moved past it, right? So our criteria did not meet, this restrict by unit palette. We were picking eaches. So it actually came down to the second sequence here, and it did utilize this record because it's green. And you can see when I highlighted that, it also gave me the same coverage information for the actions. So again, it did not utilize, but it did consider and evaluate that floor criteria. And it went through to the bulk line, which is what we would have expected because that's what we were kind of forcing in our test. So it's a great way to visualize exactly what's being done here. And you can turn this back off as well, but that's a great visualization that's now in our location directives form. Okay, so that's several features. That's just our location directives. I'm still going to go through a few things that are in this guided warehouse implementation experience on some of our other forms. Let me go through the wave templates. In the wave templates, we've added what we're calling guard railing. So we're trying to prevent users from setting up the system incorrectly or with, setup that would error out. So let's say we add the containerization method to our wave template. First of all, it's going to tell me, hey, you added that method, but a wave step code is mandatory. So I can't just save this setup. I've actually got to have a step code that references the containerization template. You can see that I have one in here that I could select. I've just called it 1, 2, 3. But if I happen to type in a value 4, 5, 6 and save this, it's going to tell me that that step code does not exist, right? So this is our guard railing, these warnings. It's trying to tell you that this setup you're trying to do is not going to work. I'm going to take this back out because just to do that for an example. But I will say, so we've also added those kind of guard railing rules to our optimization advisor. So you will also see if you run the optimization advisor that those new guard railing rules are in there as well. Let me point out the new workspace that we have as well. Let me collapse everything here. In warehouse management, under the workspaces, we have this new warehouse implementation task workspace. So this, the first thing you're going to want to do the first time you open the workspace is import the default tasks that will give you this list here of all the tasks that we consider to be kind of mandatory to get a warehouse up and running. They are sequenced. You can check them off. It's a nice little to-do list. And you will see the kind of graphic here update as well as you start to check off tasks. You might say, hey, I don't remember how to get to the unit sequence groups form. It is hyperlinked, so all you have to do is click on it and it will take you here to make sure that you complete the setup. And as you go back, it should take you back to the checklist. I will make one note that if you come in here, you're trying to import the default tasks, you're likely going to get a warning at the top that before you're able to do that, you need to go into the data management workspace and refresh the data entity list before you're able to complete this task. So just make note that you'll have to do that first and then come back in here, import your default tasks, and then you can start checking these off. All right. Let's go to the wizards that are available now. So you've got that implementation task list, but in order to make some of that setup easier, we've actually created a couple of new wizards. So the first one, Warehouse Management Initiation Wizard, is going to help you set up the values in the Warehouse Management module parameters. So that's things like your default location types and location profiles, your posting methods, your other parameters that need to be set to start utilizing the functionality in the warehouse management module. So you can walk through this wizard. And then after you're done with that, you're going to walk through the second wizard, which is the warehouse initiation wizard. named very similarly, but this one is, instead of going through the parameters, it's going to go through some of those other required setups like your work templates and wave templates and location directives. And it's going to walk you through all of that setup. Essentially, once you're done going through those two wizards, you should be able to put an order in the system, release it to the warehouse, pick it, ship it, and have a kind of fully functioning up and running warehouse. So between that implementation task workspace and your wizards, we're really trying to guide users through an easier setup experience with this module. There are a couple of minor usability features that are part of this guided implementation experience as well. One of them is when you're in that query editor form, we're auto saving the queries now instead of having to force the user to click the save button. The other one I want to point out is in the work templates. We now have the ability, let's say we're in purchase orders. And let's say we have a directive here and it's sequence number 5, but I want to move it up to the top of the list. We used to have to change all these sequence numbers, which can be frustrating. So we now have the ability to move up and down the templates and it will auto resequence for you. So seems like a minor thing, but it's really nice when you're configuring and testing and you don't have your configurations totally nailed down yet. This is a nice feature so you can move up and move down in the list now. Okay, I think that is officially everything for our guided warehouse implementation experience. Again, this is part of it's a subset under our ease of implementation experience. So we will probably be doing another Tech Talk just focused on all of these features. So if you're curious, kind of be on the lookout for another focused Tech Talk on that. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Anne.
Thanks, Nicole, and really awesome to see this new functionality in the warehousing space. Let's move over and talk about some manufacturing and planning updates in Wave 2. We'll start by talking about the Sensor Data Intelligence add-in. This add-in is controlled by a feature which is named Preview Sensor Data Intelligence. It was released in 10.0.30. And just as a note, there is an old feature from about 2020, also called Sensor Data Intelligence. You need to make sure that feature is disabled and the preview feature is enabled to use the updated version of the functionality. The reason for that is because Sensor Data Intelligence is the next iteration of our IoT intelligence service. It allows users to set up IoT sensors to send signals to Dynamics 365 supply chain management. The difference between Sensor Data Intelligence and IoT Intelligence is mainly that you're deploying the sensors in the Azure IoT Hub on your own Azure subscription instead of Microsoft's Azure subscription, which prevents you from being in that kind of black box, can't extend it scenario, and opens it up to make it really what your business needs. There are 5 out-of-the-box scenarios supported in Sensor Data Intelligence. The first one is machine status. We can use a sensor to send a signal that the machine is reporting output. And if a certain amount of time has passed, then we assume the machine is down if we haven't gotten a signal, and we'll send a notification to supervisors. The product quality scenario uses sensor measurements of product quality data, which is a batch attribute in the system. And we use the min-max values on that batch attribute for the specific item to determine whether we need to alert somebody that we're exceeding our tolerance. The third scenario is asset maintenance. We can use IoT sensors to update asset counter data, which could be something like production hours, production quantity, mileage on a forklift, for example. And that counter data is then used to trigger preventative maintenance plans to go make sure we're updating our asset maintenance. The fourth scenario is production delays. So for a particular route step for an item, we look at the total amount of time it's supposed to take. We can assign a threshold, so a percent grace period. And if we aren't meeting the specific time of output that the production route step says we should be, then we would send an alert to the supervisors. And that amount of output is being sent to the system through the IoT sensor. And the fifth scenario that comes out of the box is asset downtime. We can use a sensor which sends a signal to the system when the asset is down, and that will create an asset downtime record in our system. That is a very high level overview of sensor data intelligence. I'm not going to demo it today because we have a deep dive tech talk that is happening tomorrow in the morning and again in the afternoon. So if you haven't registered for that yet, we'll put the links in the chat and you can come see how we set it up, get it working, and the potential capabilities of using this add-in. The next feature we're going to talk about is make finished goods physically available before posting. The feature name is Preview Make Finished Goods Physically Available Before Posting to Journals. And essentially, this feature allows you to defer the RAF journal postings while still being able to report inventory into the system. Just like we have a registration step in the purchase order receiving process, what we have essentially done is added a registration step in the report as finished process in production. It allows us to add to our on-hand inventory so we can pick, pack, and ship items, but it doesn't post the RAF journal, which is the physical update to the production order, until a later point in time. The two big reasons to do this would be one, for customers who have serial numbers or batch numbers in the system, or just a high volume of RAF transactions. Deferring the journal postings will make the performance of the report as finished faster, and then we can do the journal posting on the back end and do it in lower volume hours. Another reason why you might want to use this feature is if you don't want errors in reporting as finished to hold you up from being able to ship inventory, and you can defer the RAF posting but still have your on-hand inventory come back and reconcile your errors after the fact. Some more facts: this feature works for both advanced warehousing items and non-advanced warehousing items. It supports deferred report as finished from the mobile app, the regular user interface, and the production floor execution interface. And I'll show you how we set that up in just a minute. And it has a multiple level configuration. So we can define it at our top level, we can go define it on the warehouse, or we can define it for our manufacturing execution interface as well. So now let's hop over into the system and look at how to set this functionality up. Just let my system wake up. I believe this feature was released in 10.0.30 for anybody who's interested. There we go. Okay, so once I've enabled the feature in the feature management module, to set it up, I'm going to go to the production control module, and under setup, I'm going to production control parameters. In production control parameters, under the journals tab, we've added a new parameter called posting method. There are two options here. They are either immediate or deferred. And immediate uses the legacy behavior of posting RAF journals right when you post the report as finished step. Deferred is going to be the new functionality that's been added to just register the inventory and then post after the fact. We also have a specific setup in the production order defaults, which is configurations used by the manufacturing execution tools, job card terminal, job card device, and production floor execution. In production order defaults, under the report as finished tab, we again have that posting method parameter, which is either immediate or deferred. If the production control parameters are deferred and production order defaults are immediate, we're going to use immediate. So whatever we have set for, we're going to use immediate if we're using production floor execution. So anything set in production order defaults will be what is used by your manufacturing execution tools. It won't look at the production control parameter. The third place that we can set this parameter is on the warehouse. So if we go to warehouses, on the warehouse tab, under production orders, there's the posting method again. And in this case, we have three options. We can either inherit from those other two parameters we talked about, or we can override the standard parameter and say immediate or deferred. So if you're trying to use this feature for performance, but we only really need it for one particular warehouse, we could have the standard parameter be immediate posting and this parameter on our particular warehouse be deferred, and the rest of them could be inherit. So this way we can be flexible about in which situations do we want to do the deferred posting or not. Now let's show you what it looks like when we do this deferred posting. I'm going to go to the production control module and look at my production orders. As I said before, you can do this through the warehouse mobile app or through the production order execution interface, but I'm going to do it through the user interface just to keep things simple. So for example, I can select this production order here, which is started, and go to the report is finished process. And I'm just going to keep it really simple and leave all the information as it defaults and click OK. When I do this through the user interface, what I'm going to see is I'm going to get a notification that says, just so you know, this posted with a deferred report is finished. So once it's finished processing, now we see this message. The journal posting has been deferred, but we did successfully post the report is finished step. And by that, I mean the registration. In inventory transactions, if we go look at what that looks like, we see that the production order finished good is now registered into inventory. So it's considered on hand. I can ship that on a sales order without having to wait, but we didn't receive the production order. It's not reported as finished. When we're ready to go back and post all of the deferred RAF journals, there is a new form under production orders called deferred production order posting. This shows me the list of production orders which are ready to be posted. You can see the message state is queued, and we can choose to process these. You can see this is the one we just did, and we can click process when we're ready to post the report as finished journal. So this would be if we want to do it manually. And when we try that, it gives us the same feedback that we would get, if we did the regular report is finished. So even though we're not doing it in the production order interface, we're still going to get the error message here that looks like what we would have gotten. So the actual report is finished journal failed because I didn't finish one of the jobs underneath. So I would need to go back and resolve the issues preventing me from reporting as finished. There's also a log here of my attempts that failed, message content, which shows what we were trying to achieve, and then the raw content if we want to dig into that. If I want to do this as a batch job, that is something that's available as well. So we don't have to go in and manually report as finished on all of our production orders that we deferred. There is a batch job where we can run this. And for the batch job, I would recommend that you run it probably nightly so that the physical date of report is finished is the same day that you registered the inventory into the on hand. So especially if you're using a periodic cost method, it's important to make sure your physical and financial dates are appropriate. So you want to make sure you're not registering into inventory and then never coming back and actually posting the report as finished journal. So that is the deferred production order posting, setup, and execution. And now let's talk about a couple more features. One of our new features is for multi-sourcing of products. The idea is the feature name is source products and materials from multiple vendors using planning optimization. The concept here is in the supply chain that we're currently working in. It's very risky to only source your purchase orders from a single vendor, because if that vendor can't deliver, then you lose all of your inbound inventory. So we've added a feature that supports, when you run planning optimization, splitting purchase requirements into multiple purchase orders that will then be allocated to different vendors. You can see here on the right that I've shown one of the policies that I created to have a 50% allocation to one vendor and a 50% allocation to another vendor. We define our policies and then we apply them to specific items and say this is the one that applies to that one. I want to make sure we're really clear as well that this is only compatible with planning optimization because classic master planning is deprecated. So if you want to use multi-sourcing, you need to make sure you're running planning optimization as your master planning tool. And the final feature that we're going to review today is assess supply risks to prevent supply chain disruptions. That's the same as the feature name that you need to enable in feature management to add this feature. The supply risk assessment dashboard is what you get when you enable the feature. It helps material managers understand the risk of encountering sourcing shortages and delays, which enables you to take proactive actions to balance your costs and your supply chain resilience to optimize your supply chain situation. What this feature provides is a new workspace in the procurement and sourcing module. The workspace, which you can see in the screenshot here, has a landing page with KPIs with either a check mark or an exclamation point, queue tiles that show you single source, not in full, not on time, and late confirmed orders. And then in the grid below, we can see products not on time in full and vendors not on time in full. So it's alerting you to the data in your system that could be risky in your supply chain. The KPIs with the check marks and exclamation points, those goals for each KPI are configurable in a new set of parameters in procurement and sourcing. And then we have Power BI reports embedded, part of the standard Power BI embedded reports now in the performance and risk tabs. And just a reminder, when you're running embedded Power BI, it needs to be on a tier 2 or higher environment. So if you're looking to test this out, make sure you're doing it on a tier 2 or higher. And those reports will show you even more data and information about the risk in your supply chain. That concludes our feature review. So I'm going to hand it back over to Nicole and we'll run our Q&A.
Thanks, Anne, for covering. Yeah.
We had one question for you, Nicole.
Sure.
Which is about the pack containers. So can we pack containers created by auto containerization during wave processing into a pallet, for example? So having 2 levels of containers.
If we are, I assume, referencing the new pack containers in the mobile app,
Yes.
Let me switch back to my system for just a moment, because we didn't cover this in a demo, but I can show you, because I have set this up. And again, I'm on the 10.0.31 release in my environment here. But let me show you what we get for the mobile device menu items. I mentioned it, and there was a brief kind of screenshot in the slide deck. What you have are new activity codes for creating containers for packing, for closing containers, and then I think I called it pack containers. So pack inventory into containers, and this is the main action, right, where we've got a container in our packing station and we're now adding the items to it that we want to ship. I have this set up. Let me bring up my mobile app. I'm going to say that the answer to your question, I believe, is no. You cannot pack existing containers into a new container as part of this workflow, at least not as part of this initial release. And I'll show you why. So I've got a packing menu I've added here with those 3 new options. And keep in mind that I haven't added the detours and the lookups we discussed to make this more efficient. I've just set up the basic options for now. But so the first thing it's doing is saying scan the packing location. It is going to default my packing location from my mobile device user, my worker record, into here, so I can confirm that's the packing location I'm in. It's going to ask me to scan a shipment. I've got one here that I pulled up that has inventory already sitting in my pack location. And you can see here when it says pack containers, it's saying scan the item. So if I scan a container here, it's going to error out, right? Because it's expecting a product, not a container ID. We can try it. I can look at containers that I do have. I've got a couple that are open here. So I've got a couple open containers. This one, let's just try to scan it. But I believe, like I said, because it's looking for an item identifier, that you can't enter a container here. So yeah, it's going to error out. So, but this is definitely feedback we'll take to the engineering team. We'll see if it's on the roadmap for a feature enhancement, much like those enhancements we just did for like the detours functionality. This is certainly just the first iteration of us kind of enabling the packing function on the app. So we'll take that feedback for kind of the multi-level or nested packing back to the engineering team.
Awesome. We have another question, which is, are we able to use the sensor data intelligence add-in to update quality orders? It's a good question. The answer is not as of right now. The basic scenarios supported are mostly about getting the data into the system and allowing customers or partners to use the notifications to trigger additional actions in the system through extensions, so it's more custom to your specific business scenario. So short answer is no, not right now. And that's it for questions in the chat.
Okay, great. Thanks for helping to moderate that in. And so we had our joke that we opened up with. So we said we have a supply chain joke, but you might not get it for a while. And the punchline is because it's stuck in the Suez Canal. Haha. All right, so as always, thanks for attending today. Please reach out to us if you have any questions that you think of. I know we covered a lot of information today, but hopefully you find these sessions useful. And thanks for joining us. I will toss it back to Michaela to close us out.
Thanks, Nicole. I've posted a link to a short survey in the Q&A panel. We'd love to get your feedback on today's session and hear what you'd like to see in future events. So thank you in advance for your participation on that. As a reminder, the recording of today's session will be available on the Tech Talks Community Dynamics page within the coming weeks. And finally, I'd like to extend a huge thank you to our presenters and to you, audience, for joining us today.